रोशनी का कारवां।
This podcast is brought to you by Barrier Break Solutions Private Limited and Score Foundation.
ये है रोशनी, रोशनी, रोशनी का कारवां, रोशनी। Eyeway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां।
Hi, my name is George Abraham and welcome to Eyeway Conversations. My guest today is Kiran Kaja, a techie who moved from Hyderabad to the UK and then to the US. Hi, Kiran, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me.
Kiran, so you are working with Instagram. So what is your role at a place like Instagram? What is your brief, as it were?
Yeah, so I am, my title is the Accessibility Program Lead for Instagram. And I lead the accessibility program, which is basically aimed at making Instagram more useful for people with disabilities. That includes people who are blind or visually impaired, but also people who are deaf and hard of hearing, mobility impairments, or any other kind of disabilities. So I work with a team of cross-functional designers, engineers, and product managers to build features into Instagram. But then I also work with the rest of the company and put in processes and bring about a culture change within the company so that we think about the needs of people with disabilities as we build these new features into Instagram. There are interesting ways in which we need to make media more accessible to blind people and people with disabilities. And that's an interesting challenge. That's one reason I actually took up this role about 6 months ago.
Before you came into Instagram, you were in another exciting platform called Google, and all of us use Google search. So what exactly were you doing at Google?
Yes, that was, I joined Google in 2015 in the UK and then in London when I was living in London. And I moved here to California in the Bay Area in the headquarters of Google. When I kind of joined Google in 2015, 2016, they really were not looking at the accessibility of Google search that much. So I had to start from scratch and build a cross-functional team of engineers, product managers, program managers, and designers to work on Google search and make that more accessible. One of the things that screen reader users here may notice is changing the heading structure on the Google search results page. That was one of the features that we worked on based on research, user research, and feedback that we received from users. I set up a team of 9 folks, program managers, accessibility analysts, and then also helped create a couple of engineering teams on Google search and Google Assistant, which is also the voice assistant that's available on Google Home devices, for example. And I also did some work on Google hardware products before I left in 2021. Yeah, so that was making sure that hundreds and hundreds of features that are on Google search, because Google search, most of us, actually think we'll just search for something on Google, but then also go to a third-party website. But if you ask for cricket scores on Google, it actually shows you the scorecard right there on the homepage or the Google search results page. Same goes for sports results, weather, or stock prices, or any of that information that you would normally go to a different website to find. Google search is actually showing all of that these days. And we kind of had to work with teams across the world. Um, I used to have team members that I was managing here in Mountain View, Bangalore, and Tokyo at the time, as well as work with teams in Korea, other places. So that was an interesting mix of cultures, different engineering products.
Now, you've been living overseas now in the UK and in the US for quite a few years now. So, from a living independently point of view, from a home point of view, how has technology kind of eased your life at home, for example?
I probably rely a little bit too much on technology. Um, it's an interesting example. So I used to live in a home that I really customized. I had a door lock that is smart, which means that I actually could open the door lock with my smartphone, and then there was a doorbell camera that would recognize who is at the door. So the Nest camera. I had a microwave that I can say, ask the Google Assistant to microwave for 2 minutes. I think their technology has definitely made life a lot easier. Not just the smart home technology, but you know, when we think about something like a white cane, to me that is a technology as well, right? So we've been we've been using that technology successfully for over 100 years. But I think there are things that I use my smartphone to do that I wouldn't have been able to do things easily. For example, like looking up news is news. I'm a big news junkie. And then the first thing I do when after I get up is pick up my phone and check what's happening around the world. I think living in the UK and US, you tend to rely a lot more on public transport and things like Google Maps and navigation. That's a big area where I use technology a lot, a smartphone a lot. I just moved to a new apartment in Berkeley, in California, and then I'm not very familiar with all the streets around here. So I use the Google Maps app to find the post office because I needed to send something. And on the way, I also use this app called Blind Square on the iPhone, which actually tells me what's around me when I'm walking around. I think um, even in the West, in developed countries, there's a huge difference in accessibility. When I lived in London, I think that's probably for me the most accessible city there is. And we met there, George, once. I remember, like, you were visiting, and we met at the Victoria station, and it was very easy for me to navigate there from Reading, which was actually like 50 miles or like 75 kilometers away. um, Even though I had to take a bus, a train, and a metro to get to meet you. So uh, that way, UK is a lot more convenient. When I moved to the US, here in the Bay Area, where all the Silicon Valley area is, it's not that the public transport system here, it is not that great. There is some public transport, but people rely a lot more on cars. So I had to rely on rideshare like Uber. Without Uber and similar services, I don't know what we would be. I don't think I'll have this. I'll have the same level of independence that I have now. I think so. Even in the West, it depends which area you're on. I'm in Berkeley now. That's a lot more accessible part of the Bay Area. There's a lot of history about disability rights activism here in Berkeley. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was kind of actually born in UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. And so the city is they have accessible street crossings. So if you press the button to cross a street, it'll tell you which street you're crossing, and also have a sound when the pedestrian signal is green. When I used to live in India, I never was able to cross the road.
If you know of anyone with vision impairment who needs guidance on living life with blindness, please share the Eyeway National Toll-Free Helpline number 1-800-5320-469. The number is 1-800-5320-469.
Kiran, you've been working with different corporates now, and as a visually impaired or a blind professional, when you get into the company, for example, at SAP Labs, were they kind of prepared with an accessible ecosystem, or did you have to kind of negotiate and push for some kind of support within the work environment? And what was the experience in the other companies that you worked for?
In 2006, so when I joined SAP, that was 2006. And they really didn't have, at least in India, SAP didn't have I think as I said, they had an engineer who was my friend, but he moved from the US. But they were open to asking me about what my requirements were and what I needed in terms of support. And what ended up happening at the time was, if I needed, say, things like visual support, like what's going on my screen, it would be colleagues who would be helping out. And I think at that time, when you're kind of in a new company in a junior position, like you in 2006, you end up relying on that kind of support, like from your colleagues. But yet, no, at that time they were not really set up for that. But then they also had, so SAP is a German company, and in Germany they had blind employees, and I had to ask them about how things were done. And ironically, I was working on accessibility, and then some of the internal systems are not very accessible in these companies, which is true even to this day. After 16 years in different companies, some of our internal systems that we have to use are not accessible. I think things have improved. So by the time I got to Google, if I needed visual support, I actually had a visual support assistant. So I don't have to ask or rely on the goodwill of my colleagues. And also, like, at that time, I was managing people, and there's confidential information that I don't want my team members to see, and so on. So it's still a work in progress, even in big companies. You still have to advocate for what you need, which is unfortunate. But I think there is a recognition that people with disabilities are an integral part of the workforce. We need diversity amongst the employees, and given the right level of support, people with disabilities can be as effective, or if not more effective, than others. And there have been instances now where, like, when I think about changing a job, I actually have a conversation before the job, before I accept. It's like, these are the accommodations I need, and this is the type of support I need. Will you be able to provide this? And that's a decision. That's a factor in deciding whether I want to actually join that company or not. Again, as I said, it's still a work in progress. As I grew in my career and started taking on additional responsibilities, such as at Google, I was also doing a lot of external speaking, and to create videos and also travel to all of these places, I needed support. And initially, they were not set up to provide that, but I worked with HR to kind of figure out what's the support I need. and do a little bit of self advocacy. Hopefully, in the near future, we have enough information for these companies to implement policies and have a basic level of support already available for different disability types. But it's still a case where your self advocacy is required, and it's an interesting thing. Like you find a job, you think that you shouldn't really ask your employer because it's like, oh, I already have a job, and it's like if I ask for accommodations or support, I might be treated as differently. But overall, I think it is best. What I found over 16 years of working in corporate sector is having being upfront and honest and reasonable with the accommodations you need is actually best for everybody.
I just wanted to also ask you, as a blind professional working, you worked in the UK, now you're working in the US. How far can you aspire or dare to dream in terms of where you might reach in the corporate ladder?
Oh, I don't think there's a limit. UK almost had a prime minister who's blind.
Yeah, David Blunkett.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, but in the corporate world where, technology and technological barriers are plenty these days. Now, Satya Nadella went from India and he is now heading Microsoft. Can a Kiran Kaja actually dream of heading a company?
I can definitely dream, and I've seen CEOs of companies, large-ish companies who are blind. For a Kiran Kaja, I can definitely dream. Whether I'll be able to do it or do I want to is a different question. It seems like a lot of stress, honestly. It's definitely doable. I think you should always aim big. As you grow, as I said, you need to pick up skills and a support system around you and mentors. I think you need that passion and drive that, like, I need to get to the top or wherever I need to go to. I think for me, I would be okay with, like, CEO seems like a lot. It's a stressful job, so I don't think I want to go that far. But somewhere where for me, it's like the work that I'm doing should be meaningful and should be useful for people with disabilities. Technology changed my life when I just finished high school, and it just completely transformed my life. And I kind of want to make that a reality for everyone else.
So let me just ask you another thing, which I just want to compare an Indian scenario with a scenario in, say, UK or the US. A lot of young blind people growing up in India would prefer to go into the public sector or government jobs simply because they seem to be more secure. Very few actually opt for the corporate world. What is the trend that you've noticed in the UK and the US?
For one thing, like, that job security is not there as the same as the job security in the public sector is not the same in UK/US as it is seems to be in India. So it's not the same level of same level of interest in the public sector employment as there is in India. What I see when I talk to young people here is, and I tell them, it's pursue what is actually, like, figure out what you like, pursue your interest. I see a lot of lawyers coming up, like young people taking up law. There are young people who actually go into, like, music, learn music. And journalism is another area that I've seen. There's always people interested in technology, just because I guess, like, we grow up with this. Like, these days, kids grow up with technology and they are much more familiar with it. HR roles are active. So I think it's a good mix of, there's also public sector, of course, but there's not that same level of, like, public sector / bank that India seems to have. So it's a lot more mixed.
To support our work with the blind and visually impaired, you can visit the donate page on our website www.scorefoundation.org.in. Please note www.scorefoundation.org.in.
Yeah, so let me just move on. In India now, there is something that blind people are very, very active on. There is an internet or an email platform called Access India, where there are close to 3,000, 4,000 blind educated computer technology users who actually engage. It's a platform where people discuss technology, uh, share challenges, share news, and so on. And I believe you were responsible for the origins of this platform. What actually prompted you to think of this?
Oh, that's an interesting one too. It's what now 21 years since we had that platform. Um, so this is when I discovered that computers can talk to me, and I started using the internet over a 50 like a dial-up modem, if
Right.
anyone remembers those days. Um, and my friend at the time and one of my mentors, Rajshekhar, who works at IFLU in Hyderabad, actually said there is actually a thriving community of people using computers in India, and they're mostly in Delhi and Bombay. And he connected me with some of those folks. And at the time, like I also discovered on the internet that there are like groups for blind people, blind computer users in other countries. And I basically wanted to connect with the rest of the blind computer users in India. We didn't have mobile phones or anything at the time. This is 99, 2000. And so Rajshekhar and I decided, why don't we actually start a group for ourselves, for blind computer users in India? And so we went on freelists.org. That was one of the first things. And started this group up, and just I had absolutely no clue, or I didn't even think that it would grow to be such a huge thing. It's phenomenal that like even after 21 years it's still active. I still can't believe it.
Yeah, and a lot of people actually see it as a good platform to actually disseminate information. I do it all the time, people respond, and there are lots of people who are active. Of course, you find that the people who are active keeps changing from time to time, but people are active, and the group is quite vibrant. So that's great, and that's a wonderful contribution that you've made to India and the blind people in India, because it's a great platform to find solutions. Kiran, I was reading, and in fact, I've read articles that you've written about your activities, which are extracurricular in nature. You've done skydiving, you've played cricket. So tell us about your interests, and how do you find the time, and what are the kind of facilities that you've seen in India, in the UK and the US to pursue these passions?
That skydiving one was I did not tell my family. I just sent them the pictures, and they were not happy about that. So the skydiving was an interesting experience. Other blind people said they did it, so I was like, I should probably try this too. So I think you get to go through phases in life where you want to try everything. So that was one of those phases. I tried scuba diving. But I kind of found it a bit pointless, because like all I could hear was my own breathing. And like, yeah, you go inside water and like dive into the ocean. But other than that, I've always been interested in cricket, and growing up, I would watch cricket on TV, because at the time I didn't really know that like radio commentary was much better. So when I moved to the UK, and this is one of the interesting things about the UK, is like local blindness organizations want blind people to be very active physically. So they organize, cricket teams, or they actually organize tandem cycling rides. They give you swimming lessons. They organize like hikes and walking trips. And the Berkshire County Blind Society in the UK, in Reading, where I was living, actually had a cricket team in the development league. And I used to play. I played for 3 or 4 seasons quite actively. And I really miss, having moved to the US, I really miss playing cricket. I think that's one thing that I still miss from not being in the UK and India. I think now I actually have another interesting hobby. I've always been interested in trains and traveling around the world, or like traveling by train. Because of the blind discount we used to get in India, people would actually take me on the trip with them, because 75% discount for me, 75% discount for an escort, that makes the other person gets the ticket for half the price. So I traveled a lot on trains in India. And then when I was in Japan, my friend and I actually walked into a model train shop. It's not toy trains, it's model trains that look smaller scale trains that actually look like real trains. And I got hooked. So I'm actually building a model train layout of a scene from the UK, where the trail track actually goes on right next to the ocean. So I am learning things about woodworking and foam and sculpting and stuff like that. So I think you need some kind of passion / interest to kind of get your, give some, like, from your regular routine. And those things keep changing. I tried playing the keyboard, but that is on temporary hold. So I keep changing my hobbies now and then. But I think the model train building is going to be a lifelong hobby at some point. And I'm trying to make it as tactile as possible, all the buildings and all of that. So I think I also, after the pandemic, because we were mostly at home, I haven't been very active. I'm going to take up tandem cycling because it's here in the Bay Area, the cycling culture is very, very popular. So I should be able to find volunteers to go with me on tandem bike rides.
So Kiran, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for giving the time.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoy the work that you and Eyeway does. And I also enjoy the conversations that you have with folks. And so thanks for the opportunity.
Eyeway, ये है रोशनी का कारवां.
This podcast was brought to you by Barrier Break Solutions Private Limited and Score Foundation.
ये है रोशनी, रोशनी, रोशनी का कारवां.